Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. Today is Friday, May the 8th, 2026, and welcome to 7 Investing Live. This is our live stream event where we put a spotlight on several of the stock market's most intriguing opportunities. We broadcast every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. You can always join us on our YouTube station here. My name is Simon Erickson. I'm founder and CEO of 7 Investing, joined by our executive producer, Heather Horton. You'll have to excuse this morning. I have a peck mark on my forehead after being attacked by a small green owl named Duo. Of course, this mascot of Duolingo has been picking a lot of fights lately as it's facing a new wave of competition and lower consumer discretionary spending. But does that mean that things are doomed and the owl Duo is losing the battle, or is this a long-term investing opportunity as the stock is much more reasonably repriced today? We're going to be digging into Duolingo's most recent first quarter 2026 results and whether or not this is an intriguing opportunity for us as investors. But first and foremost, let's look at what Duolingo is itself. This is a fun and lovable language learning software provider. You can actually learn more than 40 different languages, from English to Spanish to French to Swahili and even Klingon, all across the world. It started out as a rather simplistic app that was mostly on clicking on images or completing sentences, but in recent years, Duolingo has been expanding this to also include audio and video conversations and even incorporating artificial intelligence. Its founder and CEO, Luis von Ahn, is Guatemalan born. His mission is to help the world learn better. And he is very, very dead set on making Duolingo the app that's going to empower that. However, Duolingo in recent months, recent quarters, has been slowing its growth. A lot of investors are concerned about this. In fact, if we can look at the first, let's look at the stock chart of how Duolingo has looked over the last 1 year. This is not pretty for anyone who's seeing this. You can see the broader S&P 500 up 32% versus Duolingo stock down 78% year over year. Ooh, in any language, that is bad. That is not a great stock chart to be seeing. But even if we look at the 10-year chart, there's the 1-year chart we showed there. There's 10-year chart. You can see there was a lot of optimism in 2025 where the stock is up over 250% since its 2021 IPO. But it's given back a lot of those gains as we've seen here recently. So I think as investors, what we want to try to figure out is this a slow-term blip that Duolingo is going to recover from? You're going to get back the outperformance that we certainly saw last year once again, or is this something that's a permanent impairment to the business that's just not going to simply recover from quite as quickly? We just this week got first quarter results from Duolingo, first quarter of 2026. Let's put up the metrics and take a look at how things looked on the top line growth and the bookings and other things. So here you can see these are some of the most important user metrics that Duolingo always reports in its shareholder letter. Daily active users, the most important internal metric for the company, by the way, is those DAUs. Paid subscribers who are either paying the $84 a year for the basic plan or $168 a year for the Duolingo Max plan. And then the financial metrics that we'll discuss in a minute there. But I think one of the big concerns about Duolingo, at least from investors, has been that slowing, active user growth at the top. 21% DAU growth and 27% revenue growth. Those are both down from what we've gotten used to seeing of 30% growth rates, 40% growth rates in recent years from Duolingo. A lot of people are already saying out there the narrative is that Duolingo, its growth story is simply over. There are competitors. There is a small company that we've all heard of called OpenAI that is now using GPT and its different iterations of that to provide free language translation software. The same thing that Google is doing. You can use Google Translate anytime if you're in a foreign language to just simply speak something into the phone and have it translated for you. These might not be directly competing with Duolingo, which is more of an app that it wants to encourage you to come back and engage with every single day. But nonetheless, maybe that means that you don't need Duolingo as much. And a lot of people are saying there's a new wave of competition. This is a real problem. Secondly, the economy is in kind of a funk right now. When you're seeing the price of gas going up so dramatically year over year, even month over month, consumers might pull back on that discretionary spend. Maybe all of a sudden you don't want to pay $12.99 for a language learning app or $84 a year for a language learning app. This is clearly in the consumer discretionary bucket that when you've got to pay for other things that are getting more expensive, maybe you don't have as much to spend on things like that. And I think that's kind of shaping a lot of the narrative with Duolingo. A lot of people are pointing at those top line growth numbers that are slowing down and saying, this is why the stock isn't what it used to be in 2025. We think the growth is slowing. We think the growth story is over. I'm going to challenge that because as an investor, I am less concerned about Duolingo's top line revenue growth or even its top line user growth. And I'm much more interested in how profitable this business is growing and how quickly and efficiently it's expanding its intrinsic value. What does that mean? The intrinsic value of the company is based on cash flows rolling into the business, not just top line user growth. And Luis von Ahn, the entire time that he's been growing this business, has been very methodical to go after profitable growth only. Duolingo has worn a lot of hats, believe it or not, since its IPO and since its founding as a business. For a while, it was trying to do corporate translations as one idea. It was doing a whole lot of embedded advertising as another thing. It was doing in-app purchases that you could buy tokens and other things as well. And it ultimately said, really the business we want to go after is the paid subscriber growth. They can now translate to a bunch of different languages. And so what Duolingo has been doing has been investing in itself first and foremost to make sure it is the most comprehensive and best tool for language learning that is globally available. Let's put up a slide that shows the content that's been available 2 years ago in 2024 versus 2026, when you're translating from a native language, which is shown on the left-hand bar over there, to the language that you're learning, which is at the top bar up there. You can kind of see on the left-hand side, there were a lot of gaps, right? There were people that were speaking Arabic, native language of Arabic, could translate to English very quickly, but maybe not so proficient in Spanish or in French or in German or Japanese. Versus just 2 years later, look at now how many lesson plans are available from all languages to any other language that you're learning as well. The content library has become much more complete for Duolingo today than it was 2 years ago. And it's no surprise that Luis von Ahn, a computer scientist at Carnegie Mellon, somebody who was a PhD in computer science, really riding the front of that innovation wave when it comes to embedding AI into his software. Not only for expanding the content library, but actually making it a lot more interactive. We know from anyone who's learned a foreign language, you have to get out there and you have to speak it. A good reason that sometimes tutors have been very effective in teaching foreign languages because they had that one-on-one dialogue. You actually had to think on your feet about how to respond to questions. And so Duolingo has been using a lot more of that same dialogue, AI-powered dialogue, to have the same kind of conversations with people when they're learning. And this kind of video capabilities has been expensive to build up front, but Luis and the team thinks it's really the most efficient way to learn. And so I think that this is another really good move, that not only you're expanding the content library, but you're also embedding new features, especially those that are powered by artificial intelligence. And then last but not least, I want to look at some financial numbers. I want to dig into some of the nitty gritty. I won't be sharing my screen for this, but I will be describing this. The numbers that I like to look at for the business, in addition to top line growth, in addition to daily user growth, daily active user growth, in addition to free cash flows, I like to look at the return on invested capital of a business. What that means definition-wise is if you look at a company's net operating profit after taxes, NOPAT, or its after taxes operating profits, and you divide those by the invested capital of the business, which is the shareholders' equity that's been contributed, the long-term debt that's been contributed, but then also minusing out the cash that's on hand, you can get an efficiency measure of how well the business is using the money that it's deploying. And typically, if a business can borrow money, say at 8 or 10 or even 15% if it's taking out debt, any number that is in excess of its cost of borrowing, its weighted average cost of capital, is generally incrementally valuable to the business to continue to borrow and to continue to grow. Keep in mind, Duolingo has no long-term debt outside of its own operating leases. So generally, a really good business will have a return on invested capital of 15, 20%. This is a business that is incrementally growing if you've got an ROIC that's at that kind of level. Duolingo for the last 12 months has had a return on invested capital of 37%. And if we look at this as a cash return on invested capital, where we're looking at free cash flow and deducting back out its stock-based compensation, its return on invested capital from a cash perspective is 99.4%. Anyone criticizing a business that is growing at this speed, but this efficiently and throwing off this much profitability might be missing the bigger picture, that this is a business that is incrementally growing its value for its shareholders. And it's doing very, very efficiently, and it's doing it very, very profitably. And this is in the growth cycle. This is where we're incorporating artificial intelligence and expanding out the content library. Just imagine what those cash flows are going to look like when you start getting this to a more of a steady state and you don't have to spend as much on upfront on R&D or on marketing. So I think that with all of that considered, there are a couple other metrics I wanted to point out with Duolingo. Free cash flow as a percentage of revenue is now more than 50%. That's 50% of revenue is falling directly into free cash flow for us as investors during the last quarter. Again, there's zero long-term debt outside of the operating leases. The free cash flow that is generated has now been used for a repurchased authorization of $400 million. During the last quarter, it more than offset all of the dilution from stock-based compensation, which means it reduced the share count from the fourth quarter of 2025 to the first quarter of 2026. And 27% revenue growth translated into 43% free cash flow growth, mostly because the overhead costs of this business are essentially flat year over year. I think in a nutshell, there's a couple things that I really want to be watching with Duolingo. Not only the free cash flow, not only the returns on invested capital, not only the improvements it's making in its business, but let's take a look also at the number of paid subscribers and the average revenue contributed per quarter per paid subscriber. When you look about the subscription revenues that we had last quarter of $268 million that were spread across 12.5 million paid subscribers, that's the average Duolingo user globally is contributing $21.45 in subscription revenue for the quarter. That's a little bit lower than where we were last year, but keep in mind 1 year ago, we only had 10.3 million users and we derived $232 million of subscription revenue from that. This is a very important metric because you want to offset the balance. You want Duolingo to be growing as quickly as you possibly can at the top line, the number of active users that you've got, but you also want to be capturing as much revenue as you possibly can from. And again, as we're pushing that price point up, as Duolingo Max now $168, for a year, call it $42 a quarter versus $21 a quarter right now on average. I think we're going to see that price point inching up as we continue to see artificial intelligence joining the capabilities that this platform enjoys. So I think I'm keeping a really close eye on the financials. I like the free cash flow generation of this business. I really like the profitability of this business. And I like that we're going to continue seeing, I think, the average revenue per user going up. And so one last thing I want to say about Duolingo before I'll open it up to Heather to ask me some questions about the business is let's look at what Luis von Ahn has said in his very shareholder letter for the first quarter. Again, this is the perfect kind of founder that you want to have on your side, right? This is a person that's thinking about the business in long-term investing perspectives. You don't want somebody who's going out there and chasing quarterly profits. You want someone who's really genuinely interested in growing the intrinsic value of their business over long periods of time. And Luis has come out there and talked about a strategic shift, right? He wants to open up the top of the funnel for global content to any language learner of any language that wants to learn any other language in the world. He wants to make sure that daily active user growth is the number one priority for them. And then here, the thing that I've highlighted, I love this quote that he ends up his shareholder letter in. We believe that initiatives like these are key to realizing our long-term goals. Teaching better not only translates into better learning outcomes, but over time, it can drive engagement, retention growth, and brand credibility. And these are the exact same things that Luis said to me when I actually got a chance to speak with him up in Boston several years ago. This was before the company even went public. I got a chance to speak with him, to interview with him. I said to myself, if this company ever goes public, I'm buying shares of it and I'm putting it on my 7investing scorecard. This is a private company. I was already so impressed with what he was doing and what he was building and his long-term vision that he has for this, but also the methodical iteration that he's using AI and the A/B testing. This is the father of crowdsourcing that previously sold his CAPTCHA business to Google for a lot of money. And now he's out there doing it again. He's doing it in a very profitable, methodical way that you want as long-term investors to see. So I think that wraps it up. This is my defense of Duolingo here today. You know, there's so much narrative that I'm seeing that is baked into the growth story is over. The top line is slowing down. AI is going to crush this business. GPT is going to crush this business. I think that there's a lot of really good things behind that narrative. If you look at the second and the third layer deep, that you can still really like as an investor. I'm not pulling the cord on Duolingo yet. I'm actually defending what they're doing because I think I understand the long-term strategy. I really like a lot of the metrics that are still pointing in the right direction for me. And I like as they're going out and they're doing big things. I've got a massive market to grow into. So let's defend Duolingo on today's 7 Investing show. Heather, I stand open for cross-examination about this company or anything that they're doing.
One of my first questions would be why do people worry so much about AI taking over? Is it just the translation that it is very good, AI translation, but there's so many other benefits to learning a language that I don't see that like completely replacing people wanting to learn other languages.
I would agree. I think that it's a little bit different when you're downloading the app because you want to do every day a lesson plan that you're learning something rather than just the shortcut kind of, if you want to call it that, of speaking to your phone and use it. But again, that's kind of the narrative that's built in, that it's taking users that otherwise would have been converting to subscribers that just want to do it another way instead.
I feel like it might be taking away people who would have come for a short time be for a trip, but I doubt it's really affecting long-term users who have been on it for a long time and just want to learn to keep their brain or because they're interested in a culture.
Now,
Um,
Heather, I believe you have some family that is very interested in Duolingo and has been a long-term user, if I remember.
I do. My mother took French in college, but then she used Duolingo and now she's completely fluent, which is great because we've traveled to a lot of French countries with her, French speaking places. And now she's learning Spanish and she's doing really well. But it's very funny because now she speaks Spanish with a French accent. And it always makes me laugh a little bit because I learned Spanish in college and I'm just like, what
Love
are you
it.
saying? But yeah, I think she does it to keep her brain sharp and for travel as well. But um, it's a really useful app, and they also have a math program
Yes.
that both my niece and nephew use and really enjoy.
I'm glad you
So
brought that up because that's something I didn't even mention that I probably should have. Is they've got some optionality still, that they can tap into. The math app actually grew faster than the language learning app did in terms of users that just jumped into it really quickly. And now Duolingo is even offering music and chess, if you can believe it, as new subjects. Again, back to the methodical growth comment. Luis has got these. He's like, okay, when I'm ready to open the floodgates on them, let's go out there and market them. It's kind of nice to have something that's got early promise that you kind of beta tested out there that maybe they haven't fully monetized yet there, but it's kind of like sitting on a treasure chest of opportunity.
for sure. And is that where you see this company going in the future? Is it because, they've expanded so many, at some point, you reach your limit of language to other language. There's only so many out there. Do you see them becoming just a full learning app, or where do you see them in like 5 years?
Luis has always stressed he wants to be an educator of the world. He never said it has to be languages. And I do think that he's got the intention of broadening that. But I do think it's the easiest way to jump in, at least for the user group that's got smartphones that is downloading things, to go languages first, right? I mean, maybe we can brush up on our math or learn chess on the side if we wanted to. But for me personally, I would be most drawn to learning another language maybe first out of those. Maybe the music one would be kind of neat too. But I mean, these are things that, a lot of it's one-on-one interaction, right? Tutors, math tutors, chess classes, music lessons, things like that. You can very easily spend $100 a piece on those versus a full year for $100 for the app. And if the app starts getting close, where you can see, oh wow, I'm learning it quicker when I'm doing this, every day, for an hour a day, and it's right there with me. There's a case to be made that almost anything could translate to Duolingo. And the other thing that he does so well is he uses AI to adjust the lessons plans, right? So it's part of the aptitude of learning is he's trying to be at college level or even at tutor level of how efficiently people are learning things. And Luis, being a smart guy that he is, he pays a lot of attention to that because he knows if he can show, yes, I'm at parity with college level courses, you can justify paying that kind of money for it.
Yeah, and I do really enjoy that AI feature. I took the Spanish, like basically a placement test, and I was fluent in college and just have lost most of it. And it's been hard to get back into it because it's like I don't want to start zero, but like where do you start? Both Duolingo, you can take a test at the very beginning, you can go through, and then it tailors exactly like where you are in the lesson plans. And that has been another really cool feature that I
Yeah,
don't know if people know about.
and they've kind of always embraced working with institutions, with academic with schools and universities. They have the Duolingo English test, which is, I believe it's working with, is it 6 or 7,000 now universities all around the world to basically, if you want to accept an international student, you want to make sure they're proficient in English. Duolingo is internationally recognized for that. And they've been doing that a lot too.
Okay. What are some things investors should be watching with Duolingo? Oh, let you go.
One of the interesting things, pardon about me coughing and making my screen blurry here for a moment, is they've been using it for social media has actually been one of the top of the funnel ways to get people interested in this, right? You got the cute little owl. They do these kind of marketing campaigns. People kind of find out about it, from kind of the snarky comments that it makes. What's Duolingo? You discover things like that. That's for the most part free, other than, them coming up with clever posts and content to put out there. It's very low cost marketing. And it kind of had a little bit of a backlash actually this last year, Heather. In the summer, they got a little bit too edgy. Luis made some comments about being AI first. That was perhaps misinterpreted as that he was going to lay everyone off. He came back and said, no, that was not what I meant to say, or I didn't mean it to be that way. It just kind of, he's an innovative guy that wants to use these AI tools. And the company is still hiring and growing. They're actually not decreasing their headcount. But a lot of people kind of said, this is a company that's supposed to be helping people, not kind of just using the bots for everything. They kind of pulled back a little bit after that to kind of let the dust settle, and have been picking back up the social media strategy a little bit more in recent quarters. But I do think actually I would like to see Duolingo be a little bit more aggressive in their paid marketing. They've been very financially conservative in their marketing spend. They do some paid marketing. They've got that on the line items for selling general administrative, but it's not to the extent of most software companies out there. And perhaps it's just because of the market that we're in right now. Consumers aren't spending as much money as they did, but I would like them to loosen the leash on that a little bit. Maybe open up the floodgates a little bit more, knowing that they are so profitable, 50% free cash flow margin. I'm okay with those margins going down if it means you're growing your user count faster. So we'll see if they have that in store. No plans for that just yet, but certainly plenty of wiggle room if they wanted to expand that in 2027.
Possibly with reduced discretionary spending, consumer spending. They could do very well if, they position themselves as the option of like, it is cheaper than the $100 tutor an hour, the music lessons. It might be that some people are switching from more traditional forms of learning into Duolingo for affordability. So that could be an interesting position for them.
Yep, and they've got advertising too. The free plan itself doesn't charge anything. You can use Duolingo right now if you want to go download it for free. I believe they've got more than 600 million users now, might be even closer to 1 billion users that have downloaded this app. Only maybe a small percentage of them are even paying for anything. But again, if you're using the platform on a daily basis, daily active users is their primary metric. Why? Well, you're collecting advertising revenue from everything that shows up as an ad on the side. And you're getting smarter about who your user base is, what language they're learning. Can you sell them products or advertise projects for them? That's just kind of a nice little side business that's still contributing very, very high margin advertising revenue as well.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting company and doesn't seem to be dead in the dust the way the investor world seems to think it is.
I would agree. The small green owl is picking a lot of fights out there right now, but he's certainly alive and well. I'm going to, like I said, defend Duolingo on this one. This is an unpopular opinion right now. This is definitely going against the grain and against the herd. You saw that stock chart. It's hard to defend a company that's down 77% over the last year. But again, I like peeling back, the second and third layer. I still think this is a very profitable business that is methodically growing with the right leadership and the right vision going forward. A lot that I still like about Duolingo out there. So that's today's show. Again, today, May 8th, Friday, May the 8th. I hope you enjoy our 7 Investing live show here with a new background, as I've got my new office all set up and ready for you, ready to get back in the saddle. I have some really good shows coming up here in May. In the meantime, I hope you have a wonderful weekend. We'll see you again next week. Take care and be kind out there. We'll see you again on Monday.